Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Janice Lyle. I'm the director of the Sunnylands Center and Gardens, and I see David Bryant, the director of the library, was just walking in the door. I was going to use 1 minute to give you a pitch about Sunnylands before we start our formal program. And my pitch is, how many people in the audience have already been to the Center and Gardens? Okay, it's perfect. Yeah, pretty terrific. Even if you've been, you need to go back by about mid-April. The spring bloom will be at its peak in mid-April, and every day that garden becomes more beautiful right now. So as a treat to yourselves, make a note that you're going to stop into the Center and Gardens sometime on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, mid to late April. I promise it will be a spectacular opportunity. And then my other little pitch is that that we have one more Sunnylands lecture series in this series. It's Mary Irish. She's going to talk about the desert plants in our garden, and that will happen on April the 18th. And in March, on the last 2 Sundays, there will also be music in the gardens between 11 and 1. It's not meant to be a concert. It's meant to be an experience of being immersed in the garden and having live music surround you. So you wander through the gardens anytime between 11 and 1 on the next 2 Sundays. So that's my pitch, and now I'm turning it over to David.
In keeping with Janice's polling of the audience, how many of you have ever been to the Rancho Mirage Public Library? That's a pretty good number. That's how we poll here. We use science at its deepest core. But thank you all for coming today. Thank you, Sunnylands. Our partnership with the retreat at the Annenberg Retreat at Sunnylands is a marvelous thing to behold. We had 4 major programs this quarter. We have another couple coming up in the next quarter, and I think for the years ahead we will be very much working together. See Ms. Turk in the front row. I wanted to tell you that the seersucker jacket came off the rack. It was not custom, came right off the rack. Just a couple of things, and I guess it's okay to pitch a little. We have envelopes for you in the back. We are the Rancho Mirage Public Library Foundation. When you're in this room getting programs of this caliber, it's the foundation behind that. In this case, Sunnylands, of course, drove this and made this possible. But insular costs that go with this, printing, et cetera, come from the foundation. And most of our catalog for this quarter came from the foundation, too. So just a friendly reminder. And now, you've met Janice, but it is my job to introduce her. So pretend that she was not up here. Unless she advised you to go to Sunnylands and see the gardens and then, do as you're told. But the Sunnylands, just another brief plug, we are working with Sunnylands on April 18th, same room, a couple of weeks from now, 2 p.m., you'll be here, and we're going to bring you Mary Irish, who is a horticulturist who will give our audience the planning and planting of the beautiful Sunnylands gardens. So that really worked in terms of what Janice had to say. So keep that in mind, April 18th, right here. And right now, it's my privilege to introduce Janice Lyle, who will introduce Ms. Turk. From 1984 to 1994, Janet served as Director of Education and Public Programs at Palm Springs Art Museum. After that, Janet was promoted to Executive Director position at the museum. Beginning in 2007, during her retirement from the museum, Janice has had a marvelous job. She has been the director of the Sunnylands Center and Gardens and has done an absolutely fabulous job. Those of you who raised your hands and have been there see the proof of that. So without further ado, Janice, please come back up. Thank you.
So David and I are kind of We like each other. We like this partnership a lot. And so Sunnylands is delighted to participate with the City of Rancho Mirage Library and to carry on the partnership that the Annenbergs themselves established when they gifted the land for this library early on. Today's lecture is actually offered in conjunction with the Fashion Week El Paseo. And it's the third in a series of activities that we at Sunnylands planned in conjunction with Fashion Week. And each one of those activities was designed to take an element of history and to make it relevant. So we did a nightlife program where 6 contemporary designers looked at Mrs. Annenberg's fashions and actually created a new version inspired by a particular dress, or actually Walter's suit. And then it was exhibited at the Fashion Week tent. And today we have the culminating activity, which is that we have the opportunity to listen to Trina Turk talk about how the design sensibility of Sunnylands and the Annenbergs has inspired her own design sensibility. Trina is, of course, inspired by California modernism, both in terms of architecture and design. She has championed that effortless elan and that optimism of sunny California. And she's done that in her women's line, ready-to-wear and accessories, in a menswear line that's called Mr. Turk, and in residential decor and textiles. She opened her very first retail boutique in Palm Springs in 2002. So she has a long and very personal history with our region. And she has since expanded to Los Angeles, New York, Newport Beach, Burlingame, Miami, East Hampton, and Dallas. So a national noted designer who's in our midst and who today will share her insights with the Annenbergs and Sunnylands Chic. So it's my pleasure to introduce Trina Turk.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Janice. Let me just get this organized first. So I wanted to thank the Rancho Mirage Public Library also for having us today, and for the team at Sunnylands for inviting me to do this. They were very gracious with answering all of my many questions as I was putting this presentation together. And in particular, Daniel Maudlin, who is the archivist at Sunnylands, he's the one who provided all of the photos that you will see of the Annenbergs and Sunnylands, which is most of the presentation. So without the photos, the presentation would not exist. So thank you, Daniel. I don't know if you're here. He and I have been communicating by email. So thanks for all the photos. They're great. So, what is Sunnylands Chic? I'd like to propose that Sunnylands Chic is the extraordinarily curated lifestyle that Walter and Leonore Annenberg created here in Rancho Mirage. It was not just the incredible art collection, the high-style entertaining, or the notable guest list. It was a combination of a myriad of elements, including an attention to detail, gracious hospitality, and most importantly, the amazing natural setting, an unparalleled blend of climate, landscape, and architecture. So what does this have to do with Trina Turk, and why am I here giving this talk today? As a creative person, the inspiration provided by Sunnylands is multifaceted. The Trina Turk brand has always been associated with California and Palm Springs, and Sunnylands represents the epitome of that lifestyle, incorporating color, architecture, landscape, interior design, fashion, and art. When asked what is inspiring about Sunnylands, it's easier to say what's not. So this is a photo of Leonore and Walter Annenberg. She's wearing pink, which was not her favorite color. I've been told that yellow was her favorite color, but she does wear a lot of pink. And of course, enjoying this amazing modernist home and grounds that they've created. And so at Trina Turk, we emulate this lifestyle. This is a shot from our recent swimwear collection. This idea of living outdoors and sort of the glamour of what the Annenbergs created at Sunnylands. This is an interior shot of a settee in the house at Sunnylands. You can see the room of memories in the background. And I just love the way that the use of color in the interior, which is sort of an ongoing theme. There's some really bright yellow with the coral pillows, and some, no doubt, priceless painting, which I'm sorry that I don't know which painting that is. But anyway, the use of color throughout the house is something that we've also incorporated into our boutiques. This is a photo of our Palm Springs store, actually shortly after it opened, where we use this bright, bright yellow color. Here is Ronald Reagan and Walter Annenberg on the golf course, and I love Walter's exuberant wearing of color in this photo. His bright yellow turtleneck, cardigan, hat, and Kelly green pants. And this sort of look is a definite inspiration for Mr. Turk, which even the hat really, just the style of men wearing exuberant color is something that the Annenbergs, especially on the golf course, the men who golfed with Mr. Annenberg were not afraid of color. Here's another picture of Leonore in a A-line shift dress in her favorite bright yellow color, and me in orange. Anyone who lives in or has visited the desert realizes its seductive quality and how it can lure you in. The air is fresher, the sunshine is more intense, and the cocktails just taste better. Clearly, the Annenbergs understood and embraced this and evolved the idea of a Palm Springs weekend into a California modernist dream. So here's Grace Kelly visiting with Walter. This is a Trina Turk party enjoying the seductive quality of the desert. And this is, there's a Chinese pavilion on the golf course at Sunnylands where lunch would often be served. So here is Mrs. Annenberg with some of her lady friends enjoying lunch. And once again, they're all wearing these amazingly beautiful, bright colors. So here is the California modernist dream. Walter and Leonore were both born into wealthy families. Walter inherited his father's debt-ridden Philadelphia-based company Triangle Publications in 1942. He turned the business around and grew it into a publishing and communications powerhouse whose most well-known titles were TV Guide and 17 magazine. He sold Triangle to Rupert Murdoch in 1988 for an astonishing $3.2 billion and devoted his later years to philanthropy. While running his company, he served as ambassador to the UK in the Nixon administration from 1969 to 1974. As ambassador, he and Leonore hosted world leaders and British royalty at the US Embassy in London. Later visits to Sunnylands by members of the British royal family lent the luster of monarchy to the Sunnylands guest list. Leonore's mother passed away when she was 7. She and her sister, somewhat remarkably, ended up being raised and sent to boarding school by their Aunt Rose and Uncle Harry. The remarkable part is that their Uncle Harry was not just any Uncle Harry, he was Harry Cohn, the head of Columbia Pictures. Needless to say, Hollywood luminaries were part of their life growing up. Her Aunt Rose is credited with teaching the young Lee about stylish dress and sophisticated entertaining, which it looks like she's getting ready to do here in this photo. Lee graduated from Stanford University at a time when female graduates were uncommon. She briefly served as the US Chief of Protocol in the Reagan administration. Although born in New York, Leonore's upbringing recast her as a California girl and that upbringing and her familiarity with California probably had much to do with the inception of Sunnylands Chic. Walter and Leonore were married in 1951, although this is not their wedding picture. They lived at Inwood, an estate on Philadelphia's exclusive Main Line. It was Walter's second marriage, and for Leonore, the third time was the charm. In 1963, the Annenbergs purchased 197 acres of desert scrubland that would become Sunnylands. They admired the Holmby Hills home of Fred Sid and Frances Brody in Los Angeles. It was through the Brodys that Lee met Hollywood actor turned interior designer William Haynes. This is William Billy Haynes, as he was known, in a 30s, looks like Busby Berkeley musical. So Billy Haynes' earliest clients were his former leading ladies, including Joan Crawford, Carol Lombard, and Constance Bennett. He was famously fired by Louis B. Mayer, head of MGM Studios, when Mayer gave Haynes an ultimatum. If he did not drop his boyfriend, he would cancel his contract. Haynes chose his boyfriend over his acting career, and later in life was known to thank Mayer for starting his extremely successful career as an interior designer. One of Haynes' most memorable quotes was, "I can only tell you this, I would rather have taste than either love or money." I love that quote. Anyway, luckily for Haynes, he had all three, and a stellar client list that included Walter and Leonore Annenberg. Haynes introduced Lee to A. Quincy Jones, an architect that Haynes had worked with off and on for 20 years, who was known for his expansive interior spaces and walls of glass. This is the entry atrium of Sunnylands, which I think is a prime example of an expansive interior space, with a beautiful Rodin sculpture right in the center there. A. Quincy Jones's work in the desert began in the late 1940s, most notably in his collaborations with architect Paul Williams on the Town & Country restaurant at the Town & Country Center, the Palm Springs Tennis Club's Bougainvillea Room, and Romanoff's on the Rocks, which sort of part of this building still exists, but it's so drastically altered it looks nothing like this. A. Quincy Jones was also involved in the Mutual Housing Association in the Santa Monica Mountains, an area of Brentwood now known as Crestwood Hills, which began as a cooperative housing concept where 4 musicians pooled their resources to have single-family homes built around a shared swimming pool and garden. So that was sort of the opposite end of the spectrum to Sunnylands. For any of you who are architectural hobbyists like myself, you're probably aware of the seminal Eichler homes, which A. Quincy Jones and his partner Frederick Emmons designed for Joseph Eichler. These tract homes incorporated the concepts of the case study houses for middle-class Californians, open-plan spaces cleverly designed to maximize the feeling of space, walls of glass, and the idea of indoor-outdoor living. So A. Quincy Jones was working at many levels, at the highest end for the Annenbergs, while still working on commercial projects and housing for Californians of more modest means. The only directive he received from Mrs. Annenberg was that she wanted to have a Mayan roof, which he designed for her. It was painted pink to reflect the sunrises and sunsets in the desert, and the flourish of pink is a perfect example of Sunnylands chic. My own awareness of Sunnylands began when I read a 1999 Vanity Fair article about the rebirth of Palm Springs, in which Bob Colacello compared what Art Deco did for South Beach in Miami in the 1980s to what modernist architecture was beginning to do for Palm Springs. And it was true. My husband and Jonathan and I had purchased a 1930s streamlined modern home called the Ship of the Desert the prior year. We had met many creative types, also lured by reasonable prices on modernist homes, who were considering buying weekend houses in Palm Springs. This Vanity Fair article mentioned Sunnylands, and I believe it even had a small photo taken from a distance, which showed the expansive green lawn and the house off in the distance. Although we had bought our house in Palm Springs and Rancho Mirage was physically close, it was clear that unless you were a head of state, a visiting dignitary, or a titan of industry, you were unlikely to see Sunnylands. I hope that maybe it would be on an architectural tour someday. The first thing that's important to note from an aesthetic standpoint is that the Annenbergs, like many before them, chose to be more experimental and flamboyant in their desert home. As you can see from this photograph of the Philadelphia estate Inwood, the interior and the exterior of the two homes were very, very different. So here is what looks like a living room at Inwood. And here is the Billy Haynes designed yellow presidential bedroom at Sunnylands with the beautiful Billy Haynes furniture, the Chinese porcelain vases turned into lamps, and then, of course, the succulents outside that create their own form of statuary. This is the circular drive in front of Inwood in Philadelphia, and this is the circular drive in front of Sunnylands. The Annenbergs' embrace of modern architecture in the desert was a grand-scale example of what had been happening in the 20s and the 30s with the earliest modernist homes in Los Angeles, a departure from tradition that was possible due to a lack of a fixed architectural vernacular. The climate also provided an opportunity to create a lighter, more transparent form of architecture. All of this combined to imbue Sunnylands with a characteristic Californianess. Although the setting and the art are breathtaking, the living spaces are decidedly intimate, especially in comparison to the McMansions of today. The furniture grouping here seems engaged in conversation without a guest in sight. At Trina Turk, we've embraced California's modernist architecture as a touchstone and an essential ingredient to the look of the brand. We've shot at many beautiful homes and commercial buildings, both in LA and Palm Springs. This pillow shot was shot at the Abernathy House, which is a house in Palm Springs by William Cody. We did a holiday shoot at a Crombie Taylor house, actually fairly near here in Rancho Mirage. We shot at another Cody house up in Southridge, which is where this holiday shoot took place. Last year, we did a collaboration with Banana Republic, which was inspired by Palm Springs, and the ad campaign was shot at Richard Neutra's Kaufman House. For spring 2012, our theme was Country Club Coquette, and we did our photo shoot at a house on a golf course in Rancho Mirage, also very near here. This is the airport, the Palm Springs Airport, by Donald Wexler. This is this incredible house in Thunderbird Heights. It's a Moroccan-style house. The interiors were done by T.H. Robsjohn Gibbings, and this sort of marble colonnade is repeated inside the house in wood. It's an amazing house. This is back to Country Club Coquette on the golf course in Rancho Mirage with the home in the background. Here are two Mr. Turk guys jumping into the swimming pool at a Donald Wexler designed steel house in the north end of town. And then this is the Bolero house, which unfortunately I think has been drastically altered since this photo was taken. Color is another indispensable element to both Sunnylands and Trina Turk. I love in this photo how the Monet's iris painting sort of is a beautiful pop of blue on the wall there, and then also you see the orchids on the side tables, which there were always orchids throughout the house, which added beautiful color. The other thing that's sort of interesting is that these side chairs in this photo are these big, cushy lounge chairs that Billy Haynes used in many of his projects, and he called them Sanaya chairs, which is actually Haynes spelled backwards. Also, this is the room of memories at Sunnylands, and I love how they used, or how Billy Haynes selected this really bright coral for the upholstery. Coral also, as worn by Mrs. Annenberg with the gown with this chiffon overlay. There's actually a parade of colors that she wore here, which I will just go through. Here she is in a beautiful lime green with Walter. The interesting thing about this particular look that she's wearing is, if any of you have looked at Gucci for spring 2013, there are these pantsuit looks with like tunics and matching pants that are very, very reminiscent of this look that Mrs. Annenberg is wearing in this photo. Here's a photo of Mrs. Annenberg with Betsy Bloomingdale. Of course, she's wearing this brilliant chartreuse color, and Betsy Bloomingdale is wearing black. In the interior of the house again, I love this painting in the background. This is actually, I think, my favorite painting at Sunnylands. It's by an artist called Jacques Villon, and the title is Baby with a Bottle. But if you look at the painting when you visit, it's very hard to figure out where the baby with the bottle is. I just love the really bright pop of color in this sort of soft yellow bedroom. And here's Mrs. Annenberg in pale pink on the golf course. And then in pale blue, kind of matching the Chinese floral design on the upholstery in this shot. Once again, the art and the orchids and the porcelain providing color here. And then both of the Annenbergs wearing bright red with Bill Clinton. Red in the interior in the game room with this brilliant yellow. And then Mrs. Annenberg in her favorite color. I spoke with Michael Comerford, who was the Annenbergs' house manager for 35 years at Sunnylands after 5 years in London. He told me that Mrs. Annenberg's favorite color was yellow. She loved Ferragamo shoes, and she favored Oscar de la Renta and Escada in the desert. In London, she felt she should be more conservative, and she wore Yves Saint Laurent, Christian Dior, Pierre Balmain, and Valentino Couture. She liked a high neckline and long sleeves for official occasions in London. And here she is in a pink paisley print. And then we're launching into some Trina Turk usages of color. I guess the one thing I could say about the difference between the color that we use and the color that Mrs. Annenberg seemed to favor was that she always wore these really beautiful, sort of bright pastels, almost sorbet shades, and we are willing to go a little bit brighter than that. So hot pink little jacket with strapless dress. This woman is sort of styled, I think, in the style of Mrs. Annenberg. She's wearing a brushstroke painted little shift dress. This is one of my favorite dresses that we've done. It's a long sweater dress with these big bands of color. These are the country club coquettes again, with their gentleman friends playing cards. The other thing we like to do is mix pattern. And so in this slide, you see multiple patterns being mixed together, which is something that we're always doing at Trina Turk. And then the use of coral and yellow, which are two of my favorite colors as well. So back to color at Sunnylands. Greenhouses for orchids on the property provided an endless supply of cymbidiums in pink, purple, and white. The aforementioned pink wall around the property was installed in the 1990s when the pink oleanders that formerly surrounded the property began to die. The pink shade was selected to match the Mayan roof of the house. The Mr. Turk brand has looked to the menswear aesthetic of Palm Springs as a great source of inspiration. The golf, pool, and cocktail culture, both past and present, have embraced color and pattern, and Mr. Turk modernizes the look with updated fits and fabrications. I love this shot. You could probably do a whole separate talk about golfing at Sunnylands, but since I know nothing about golfing, I will leave that to somebody else. But I do love this photograph of the golf course with the Sunnylands flag with the logo on it, and then off in the distance you see the Chinese pavilion. This is the country club coquette, again with her sharp boyfriend. Walter Annenberg and his golfing companions personify this style, which is casual and relaxed, but pulled together and sharp. No tracksuits for these gentlemen. And I'm sure that all the men in this photo are of note, and I'm sure that many of you know who they are, but the only person I know other than Mr. Annenberg is Ronald Reagan in the plaid pants. Charles Schultz, somebody's saying. George Schultz, not Charles Schultz. Charles Schultz is the Peanuts guy. Sunnylands and Trina Turk also Both embrace the multicultural mix of California, Sunnylands in its architecture and interior design, and Trina Turk in our colors and patterns. I personally am a multicultural mix myself. My mother is Japanese and my dad is Caucasian. So multiculturalism comes very easy to me, and I think it's something that you see throughout Sunnylands and you also see in the Trina Turk brand. This mix of influences is another key to Sunnylands Chic. Chinoiserie, or Chinese-inspired decorative motifs in home accessories, patterns, and furniture styles were apparent in almost every Billy Haynes project. At Sunnylands, we see Chinese statuary on its own or made into lamps, which was one of Haynes's signatures. He would often actually drill through the side tables for the electrical cord so the cord would not show. Porcelain vases, embroidery patterns, and color palettes also demonstrate a Chinese influence, such as the striking red, yellow, and black color scheme in the game room. Here is a Trina Turk bikini with an Asian floral motif and a silk jersey tunic with a swirling Asian-inspired floral design. There are also Central American elements at Sunnylands, including the Mayan roof, the lava stone walls, which I neglected to include a slide of, but there are lava stone walls in the entryway of both the visitor center and the house, which are beautiful and lend this sort of like rugged feeling. The actual logo of Sunnylands, which you can see behind me on the wall, is a vaguely Aztec or Mayan mask. Perhaps somebody at Sunnylands could share with us what exactly the origin of that is. I'm not positive, but it has that sort of Mexican vibe. There's also a 20-foot bronze columnar fountain by the Morado brothers in the Circular Drive that is a half-scale replica of a similar column at the Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City. At Trina Turk, we dabbled with Mayan influences for this print, which we actually called the Mayan print. And then this, from summer 2008, is a fiesta-printed patio dress. And coincidentally, in this photo, we actually used Billy Haynes chairs as a prop. So, a couple of years ago, when I read that Sunnylands would be open to the public, my interest was piqued. When we received an invitation to the dedication and brunch last February, I was excited. This shot is a shot of the drive leading up to the visitor center, and on the day of the dedication, it was actually lined with American flags. And the invitation said that it was a dedication and a brunch, and for whatever reason, maybe because I didn't know what the dedication actually meant, I focused on the idea that it was a brunch. So when we got there and this driveway was lined with American flags, all of a sudden I realized that it was maybe not going to be about mimosas and croissants. And there was a little bit more to it than that. So as we entered the visitor center, we entered through the visitor center, we were taken in golf courts. This is the back of the visitor center, which is beautiful. We were taken in golf courts to a big tent, which had been set up on the lawn. And as we came in, there was a local choir singing "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." It was a beautiful day, and it just really puts you in this mood, especially when I didn't really know what to expect. The one side of the tent was open so that you could see the view of the sky and the golf course. And so the choir was singing "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." I thought, wow, this is just not any brunch. And the U.S. Marine Corps Color Guard was there. There were speeches by Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy and Congressman David Dreyer making an impassioned plea for intelligent civil discourse and an end to partisanship. And they were encouraging rational, elegant, and tolerant conversation, and reinforcing this idea that Sunnylands was devoted to the idea that through respect and dialogue, we can move forward as a society. The whole thing ended with the USC Trojan Marching Band playing 3 cheers for the red, white, and blue in their full, feather helmeted regalia, marching across the lawn. And it concluded with the release of white doves into the sky. So it was beautiful, and it was very patriotic and very moving. And I was like, this is, I guess I told my husband that it was a brunch, and he was like, wow, this is so amazing. And anyway, so we were not really prepared for the dedication. But it was at the dedication that I realized that the cultivated and refined beauty of Sunnylands Chic was a means to an end. Creating this incredible retreat and inviting world leaders to stay was the Annenberg's way of giving visitors a fresh perspective that would allow breakthroughs in dialogue and ideas that might not happen in less remarkable surroundings. The Annenbergs have given many gifts to Southern California, and with Sunnylands now open to the public, they have also given their unforgettable home. Thank you. Are you coming up? So I think we're going to do a little Q&A now, and Janice is going to answer any questions about Sunnylands. And I will be...
It's coming up. But anyone who would like to ask questions of Trina, if you would come to the front and use this microphone, then everyone can hear you.
Don't be shy.
Hi, Ms. Turk. My name is Jennifer. And what did you wear to the brunch? And did you feel appropriately dressed?
I remember I actually wore a big crazy hat, which turned out to be kind of appropriate. A navy and white striped tank top, which was Trina Turk, a little Trina Turk jacket, and I actually can't remember what pants I wore. But I did feel like I was appropriately dressed, thankfully. Yes. Good, how are you?
How are you?
I'm fine, how are you?
Great speech. I enjoyed every moment
Thank
of
you.
it. So I'd like to know, how did your influence of Palm Springs get started? Are you a local?
I was born and raised in California. I lived in the Seattle area for junior high, high school, and college. I mean, my first trip to Palm Springs was when I visited my Aunt Rose, who is nothing like Leonore Annenberg's Aunt Rose. She lived in a place, I think it was called Villa Roma, and smoked her head off all day. But that was my first visit to Palm Springs, and I actually remember loving it. And my husband and I started to come back to Palm Springs more frequently, starting in the mid-'80s when we moved back to LA. In the early '90s, he was a fashion stylist at the time. He's now a photographer. In the early '90s, there were a lot of photo shoots going on in Palm Springs, and so he was out here constantly working on photo shoots, and that's when we became interested and started looking for a home.
So randomly, I live in New York City. I produce and cast fashion shows. I know
Okay.
I was at the box this
Oh,
past season.
good.
We have a lot of mutual friends. I know your husband is a photographer, Jonathan Skoll, and everything. So I have been producing, casting fashion shows for 17, 18 years in New York City, and I have been coming out here with my family for 17, 18 years, and Sunnylands has always been a great interest of mine, and I have used ideas about Palm Springs in some of my fashion shows, and I'm actually looking to eventually move out here and work in the fashion. I don't know if work in the fashion business, but take my fashion knowledge and bring it out here to Palm Springs, and maybe with El Paseo Fashion Week and everything. So at some point, I'm using this point out, I'd love to email you and talk about possibly working together.
Okay, we will be in touch.
Okay, for sure. Thank you so much. I really did enjoy it. Thank you so much.
Hi, Trina.
Hi.
My name is Heather Van Haften, and I have two wonderful boyfriends that owned a home in early 2000s in Palm Springs. And about 2002, when you opened up your first store, they said, oh, you have to come by and buy some clothing or look at the store. And I think I've been purchasing ever since, the last 12 years.
Thank you for that.
So my question is inspiration in regards to future designs that are coming up, maybe or where do you draw it from besides Palm Springs? I know you travel a lot. You go to Bali, but what's coming up for you? What haven't you done that you're bringing into your
Well, I
fashion
mean,
line?
the main source of inspiration is living in Southern California because that's where we really are. We produce 11 collections per year, so you pretty much have to just keep going constantly. And there's not really a lot of time to hem and haw over what you're doing. You basically have to decide what you're doing and execute it. Which is what we do. As far as what's going on for the future, I mean, the main thing that we're working on is really expanding into other categories that we have not yet expanded into. We have, for example, shoes and handbags are things that we have dabbled in, but we haven't really done full collections that are wholesaled to other retailers. So those two things are important. Expanding Mr. Turk to a larger distribution is important. And one of the things that's really happening right now is our Trina Turk residential product is really starting to gain traction, and that's an area for growth as well.
My husband he is a Mr. Turk, although he's a Mr. Nick, but I dress him all the time as much as I can. So anyway, I brought something that perhaps after the Q&A you could sign for me.
Okay, I will. Hi.
Hi, my name's Mary Brent, and
I know you, Mary Brent.
yeah, hi. I had no idea what to expect coming today, but I love Sunnylands, and I've been so moved by your stores, your growth here, and your popularity. And this talk, I think, was brilliant, and I kept thinking, I wish so many more people could hear it. So I just want to plant a seed for like Modernism Week. Doing something, maybe again using your inspiration of Sunnylands, using Palm Springs, but for Modernism Week, I mean, they should just have you talking.
Thank you very much.
Really, it was marvelous.
Well, now that the work is done, if everyone says it's okay, I would be happy to do it again.
Excellent, excellent. And talk about yourself, because it was very inspirational. I think just insert a lot of Trina Turk in it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Vera Sarup-Kinchovan. I grew up at 1758 Mesa Drive. And I'm just below your house. And
Right.
I was wondering if you would just tell us a little bit how you came across the boathouse and what kind of repair or disrepair it was in when you started.
Sure. It's kind of a long story. How much time do we have? No, I'm just kidding. We were looking for, we thought we were looking for an Alexander house because we wanted the sort of classic Palm Springs sliding glass doors out to the pool kind of thing. And we were looking for just a little weekend house. And we had a very patient real estate agent who took us to see all kinds of houses over a very long period of time. And then finally, after he had gotten to know us fairly well, he said, well, let's just go look at this house called the Ship of the Desert. I think you guys will like it. I don't really know if it's for you, but we should go check it out. So we loved it immediately. It was actually in very poor condition. Not decrepit, but it had been, you could tell that there had been a lot of parties there, and it was a little rough around the edges. But there was something about the house that really appealed to us, and we had gotten so caught up in this mid-century modern Alexander concept that we had forgotten that we actually really loved streamlined modern architecture, which there is a bit of in Seattle, which is where my husband and I met each other. So we bought it, even though at that time we really kind of had no business buying that house. It was too big, it was in terrible condition, it was out of our budget, and I mean, it sort of like went against every sort of idea of what we were looking for. And of course, now we're thrilled that we did it. We had a fire. We bought the house in June of 1998. We had a fire in November of 1998. That was arson, which is a whole nother long story. But it took about 2.5 years, and we had the Sunset magazine, which I showed the cover of in the presentation, had a floor plan. And so using that floor plan, we actually brought the house back to the original floor plan. There had been alterations done to the house. And so in terms of the floor plan, it's more like it was originally now than it was when we bought it in 1998. It was a long project. It involved the Palm Springs Historical Society, the architect, the contractor, the insurance company. It was a big project, but every time I pull into the driveway, I'm very happy. So it all came out happy in the end.
It was a wonderful speech. Thank you. Yes. Every time I hear a designer, I always come with one plea. Please, could we have sexy, wonderful swimsuits for women of a certain age?
Okay.
Please. I just discussed
I
this
will
with...
work on that.
Okay.
Okay, are we done? All right, thank you all for coming.